You know, have you ever looked back at like a big historical moment and thought, okay, we know what happened,
Yeah.
but why? Why then? Why that way? What were all the little things, the environment that set it all up?
Absolutely. It's often the why that's much more interesting. Is it the context?
Exactly. And today, that's what we're doing. We're taking a deep dive into the Quraysh tribe in pre-Islamic Arabia, specifically trying to understand the deeper reasons why Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, emerged from this particular group.
Right. And our sources for this, like the status of Quraysh and the selection of Prophet Muhammad from among them, they really paint a fascinating picture. It's not just a simple story.
No, it definitely isn't.
It asks us to look deeper, to see the links between the people, the place, Mecca, and this absolutely pivotal moment in history.
So our mission today is to sort of unpack how Quraysh was uniquely positioned. We're talking geographically, economically, socially.
Yeah.
How all that made them the cradle for message meant for the whole world. And we'll also get into that really interesting paradox, why they initially resisted so strongly.
Yeah, that's a key part of the story.
So by the end, hopefully you'll have a much richer sense of the maybe unseen wisdom behind it all. Okay, let's start with Quraysh themselves. The sources are pretty clear. They weren't just, another tribe hanging out in the desert. What made them stand out? What was so significant about them, even before Islam?
Well, the first thing that jumps out, really, is their spiritual role. It's fundamental. Our sources tell us Quraysh were divinely chosen, you could say, to settle in Mecca.
Chosen.
Yes, specifically where the Kaaba stood, built by Ibrahim and Ismail, peace be upon them. Mecca itself was destined to be this center for worship, for monotheism, even with all the polytheism around. It had this sort of special divine protection.
So they weren't just living there, they were guardians.
Guardians is exactly the right word. Guardians of the Kaaba, God's house. That gave them this immense, almost sacred responsibility.
And how did that play out practically? What did being guardians actually involve day to day, especially during pilgrimage?
It involved very specific respected duties. Things like Sikaya, making sure pilgrims had water, which was obviously vital.
Crucial, yeah.
And Rafada, providing food for them. Plus, they managed all the delegations coming to Mecca, organized the whole pilgrimage season. It was a massive undertaking.
Wow. Okay.
And all this gave them just incredible moral and spiritual prestige across all the Arab tribes. Everyone knew them as the people of the sanctuary, the servants of the house.
Those titles carry a lot of weight.
Immense weight. It commanded respect everywhere.
Okay, so that spiritual authority is huge. But the sources also talk about another big piece of their power, their economic clout. This part's really interesting.
Oh, absolutely. Economically, they were incredibly savvy. It wasn't just about the pilgrimage, though that was important.
Yeah.
They built these really extensive trade networks.
How did they manage that in such a fragmented region?
Through something called al-alaf. These were basically pacts, agreements, pacts of protection they made with surrounding tribes.
Like treaties.
Sort of like ancient trade treaties, yes. They guaranteed safe passage for Quraysh caravans. Think of it like creating safe corridors for commerce, built on trust and alliances. Really quite sophisticated.
So these weren't just local deals, they reached far.
Oh, very far. These pacts allowed them to run caravans all the way north to Syria and south down to Yemen. They had these famous winter and summer journeys.
Winter and summer journeys. That sounds familiar.
It should, because the Quran itself mentions it. In Surah Quraysh, it talks about the elaf of Quraysh, their security in the winter and summer journeys. And the verses basically say, look, because of this security and provision being fed, kept safe from fear, which comes from the Lord of this house, the Kaaba.
They should worship him.
Exactly. It directly connects their economic success and safety to God's blessing and their duty to worship him alone. And of course, this trade brought them wealth and power.
But more than just wealth, right? You mentioned broader connections.
Yes. Critically, it put them in regular contact with the big players at the time. The Romans, the Persians, the Abyssinians. This wasn't just about selling goods. It broadened their whole perspective, gave them knowledge of the wider world, a more cosmopolitan outlook than many other tribes in the peninsula.
Okay, so we've got the spiritual guardianship, the economic power through trade, and these elaf pacts. What about the people themselves? Their character, their society? The sources seem to suggest they had distinct qualities there, too.
They definitely did. Quraysh were widely known for their eloquence, their mastery of the Arabic language.
Eloquence. How so?
Well, you had places like the market of Okaz in Mirbet. These weren't just for buying and selling. They were huge platforms for poetry, for oratory. People came to compete, to showcase their linguistic skills.
So like cultural centers.
In a way, yes. It honed their language, made their dialect particularly clear, expressive, really the standard of beautiful Arabic. But beyond language, they were known for wisdom and a certain intellectual capacity.
How did that manifest in their society?
Well, crucially, big decisions weren't just made by one chief figure on a whim. They had the Dar al-Nadwa, their council house.
Dar al-Nadwa.
Right. Leaders would gather there to consult, to debate, to reach consensus. It showed a culture that valued collective decision-making, not tyranny, which was pretty advanced for the time and place.
That's a really interesting point. It's sort of built-in structure for governance.
Exactly. And their social structure reflected that too. Each clan, or batday, had its own leader, sure. But the overall leadership of Quraysh kind of emerged from agreement among these leaders. It created this unity within diversity, almost a model for managing different groups together.
And it's right into the specific environment, this mix of spirituality, trade, eloquence, consultation, that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is born and grows up.
Precisely. And our sources make a big point about his reputation among them long before he received any revelation.
What was that reputation like?
He was known, universally named, as Al-Sadiq al-Amin.
The truthful, the trustworthy.
Yes. And this wasn't just a nice nickname. It was earned. Earned over decades of consistent honesty, integrity, reliability. Everyone in Quraysh, his own people, knew this about him. They'd seen it their whole lives.
So that personal history mattered hugely.
Immensely. It gave him this incredible moral capital. So when the divine message started, that established reputation for absolute truthfulness was, well, it was a crucial shield. People couldn't just easily dismiss him as a liar because they knew he wasn't.
Okay, let's pull these threads together. We have Mecca, the sacred center. We have Quraysh, the respected guardians and traders. We have their language, their culture of consultation. We have the prophet's own impeccable character known to them all. So, the big question, why this tribe, Quraysh, for the final prophet and a message meant for everyone? What's the divine wisdom here, according to the sources?
It really seems like a confluence of factors, all pointing to a deliberate preparation. First, you've got the place, Mecca. As guardians of the Kaaba, the message is automatically anchored to the ancient center of monotheism, destined to be Islam's spiritual heart.
Right, the connection was already there.
Second, their tribal status. Quraysh commanded respect across Arabia. A message coming from them wouldn't be easily ignored. It had immediate standing, immediate reach within the peninsula. An unknown tribe wouldn't have had that impact.
Makes sense. And what about beyond Arabia?
That's the third point, their global connection. Because of Alaf, because of their trade with the Romans, Persians, Abyssinians, they were uniquely positioned to eventually carry a universal message outwards. They already had the contacts, the roots, some understanding of the wider world.
They weren't isolated.
Not at all. And fourth, there's the language. The Quran, being this miracle of Arabic eloquence, was revealed in their dialect, the most prestigious and refined Arabic. For a people who prided themselves on poetry and rhetoric, this was the ultimate linguistic challenge and proof.
Wow, so it really does seem like all the pieces were put in place. It wasn't random or just about lineage for its own sake.
Exactly. It feels less like favoritism and more like strategic divine preparation, creating the ideal environment.
And you see this pattern elsewhere.
You do. Our sources suggest this fits a broader pattern of divine wisdom. It's not about making one family or tribe inherently better, but about preparing the ground. Just like, Moses was raised in Pharaoh's house to eventually confront Pharaoh, or Jesus came from the children of Israel to call them back. Muhammad, peace be upon him, coming from Quraysh, the leading tribe of Arabia, situated at its spiritual and commercial crossroads, fluent in the highest form of Arabic, connected to the wider world. It was the perfect setup for the final universal message. It shows prophethood is about divine selection, meticulously preparing all the necessary conditions.
Okay, but here's the really fascinating part. Maybe the most human part. Despite everything knowing his character, their shared history, the prestige, all of it, Quraysh became the main source of opposition. Fierce opposition.
Yes.
Why? Given everything we've just said, why would this tribe, seemingly so perfectly prepared, reject him so strongly? What did the sources say about that?
This is absolutely crucial. The sources are very clear. Their rejection wasn't really about doubting him or his honesty. Deep down, many of them knew he was telling the truth.
They knew.
The core issue, according to our sources, was fear. Plain and simple, fear of losing what they had.
Losing what? Their status, their power.
Exactly. Their power, their prestige, their leadership roles, the economic system tied to the idols around the Kaaba. Islam came to change everything. It challenged the whole social, religious, and economic order they benefited from. It directly threatened the authority of the tribal elites.
So it was self-interest over truth.
That's precisely how the sources frame it.
Yeah.
It was about protecting their worldly position. There's that powerful verse in the Quran, Surah An-Naml, which says, meaning, they rejected them the signs wrongfully and arrogantly, though their own souls were convinced of them.
Though their own souls were convinced. That's chilling. It wasn't ignorance, it was denial.
Conscious denial, driven by arrogance and fear of losing status.
Are there specific stories or examples in the sources that really show this conflict, where you see them privately acknowledging the truth but publicly fighting it?
Oh, definitely. There are quite a few well-known accounts. One is Walid ibn al-Mughira, a very prominent, respected leader in Quraysh.
Okay.
He listened to the Prophet recite the Quran, and he was genuinely moved. He apparently said something like, it has a sweetness, a beauty. Its branches are fruitful, its roots are deep. It rises above all else. High praise.
Sounds like he was convinced.
Initially, maybe. But then, the pressure from other leaders, the fear of losing his own standing, he completely flipped. He started telling people it was just magic to influence others, a total reversal, driven by social pressure and status.
Wow. And any others?
Another classic example is Abu Jahl, one of the most bitter enemies.
Right.
Yet, there are accounts where he privately admitted Muhammad's truthfulness. But his public stance, he basically said, look, our clan, Banu Makhzum, competed with Muhammad's clan, Banu Abdanaf. In everything, feeding pilgrims, carrying responsibilities, we were neck and neck. Now they say they have a prophet receiving revelation. How can we ever match that? By God, we'll never believe him.
So it was pure tribal rivalry and jealousy, not about the message itself.
His own words suggest it was exactly that. Pride, envy, fear of being eclipsed. It wasn't an intellectual rejection of the message. It was a rejection based on power dynamics and ego.
So the big takeaway here seems to be that resistance to truth isn't always about a lack of evidence or a lack of understanding. Sometimes it's much more about what people feel they have to lose.
Precisely. For the Quraysh leadership, the primary driver was fear of losing their worldly power and influence. It's a really powerful lesson about human nature, isn't it? Obstacles to accepting truth often come from within, from our attachments, our ego, our fear, rather than from the truth itself being unclear.
That really adds another layer to understanding this whole period.
Well, this has been incredibly insightful. We've really peeled back the layers on Quraysh, their sacred role, their trade genius, their unique culture, and seen how it all converged, seemingly preparing the way.
A convergence that points towards that divine wisdom we talked about.
And then delving into their resistance, seeing that very human struggle between recognizing truth and clinging to worldly power and status. It's quite a story.
It really is. And I think the core takeaway is that the selection of the prophet, peace be upon him, from Quraysh wasn't arbitrary. It highlights a meticulous divine plan, preparing the perfect conditions, the place, the people, the language, the connections, for the final message to humanity. It was about strategic readiness, not just lineage.
And that initial resistance, while intense, ultimately couldn't stop the message, which maybe tells us something about the power of truth versus worldly attachments in the long run.
Indeed. It suggests that conviction can overcome those obstacles, even if self-interest puts up a strong fight initially. So, maybe a final thought for everyone listening. Consider your own context. What parts of your environment, your tribe, your established ways of thinking, your own al-Ilaf packs or Dar al-Nadwa circles, perhaps might be preparing you for new understanding.
Or conversely, what attachments or fears might be creating subtle barriers, maybe blinding you to truths that are right there. Something to reflect on.
Definitely something to reflect on. Thank you so much for sharing these insights today.
My pleasure. It's a fascinating topic.
And thank you all for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep delving deeper.